Well, thanks again for the time. One question or a couple questions I wanted to ask around the conversation of buy versus build in AI tools, AI strategy, where to start. We've had a lot of customers come to us that have invested in a lot of clinical data strategy work, lightly into AI, built on kind of that clinical data strategy. But a lot have come to us with a couple of pitfalls or a couple of challenges in starting that journey. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions in that realm of build versus buy. So if you were running a healthcare operations department at a health plan or federal agency, would you buy or build your own AI tool sets?
Yeah, so my first point on that is there's a lot of AI tool sets that are out there on the market that brand themselves as being generic AI solutions. Um, uh, these are usually something that are just a little bit precautionary in the sense that most AI solutions are going to be pretty narrow to what you're specifically working on. Um, Given that a lot of these companies don't typically have large data science teams or very experienced ones at that, it would be most beneficial to often buy one of these, but specifically buy them from a team that has expertise in healthcare AI specifically in those narrow use cases. So while a lot of the stuff that we do, of course, is very practitioner, is very payer driven. There's of course a lot of use cases out there. We're specifically focused on maybe within the hospital, for example, and those types of AI data scientists might be a little bit different from the types of people that we have on our team, for example. So my key point would be it's okay to try to build if you're the only expert in what you're doing, but if there's somebody else out there who knows a lot about what you're trying to get a solution for, it's best to go to the people who have maybe done it a lot and have experience with that specific use case, rather than a general kind of tool set, if that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the key aspects that you should consider when investing in an AI strategy?
Yeah, so like I said, focusing on on a team that has particular experience in your use case. Again, like for example, natural language processing, it's across the board a very, very, very wide field. It's very not beneficial to bring somebody who has natural language processing experience in social media, for example, and moving them into healthcare. There's such a domain mismatch there. On top of that, the rules of the game are very different, right? So, what I found specifically in healthcare is that communicating with review teams, interfacing with clinicians has been absolutely pivotal to understanding what the problem is and how to carry out a solution properly. A lot of the times when you bring in somebody who may be like, for example, a general NLP language processing expert, they a lot of the times don't understand the importances of the nuances of healthcare, and they aren't able to have those conversations and translate those importances ultimately into the code they're using, or they'll try to use their previous code sets and adapt them to healthcare rather than building them within healthcare from the ground up.
Right. How do you make AI tools scalable to meet the needs at the enterprise level with the amount of data that, some of these plans and federal agencies are processing? How do you make these tools scalable?
Yeah, so the data that we're dealing with is obviously pretty large. Scalability is really difficult at the levels that we're sitting at. And one of those solutions, of course, is it sometimes means that we can't use very extremely high demanding compute solutions. It of course means that using the cloud. I think I've seen different instances of on-prem versus off-prem capabilities, and almost across the board, the off-prem solutions, cloud-focused, are going to be the best. Knowing what technologies to use, so database-wise, of course, there's things like Redshift out there that allow you to manage a lot larger data sets. and ultimately just knowing the right solutions to use and where your bottleneck is at any given time is really the best thing to focus on. So, of course, our limitations are pretty high. But keeping an eye on where that bottleneck is and knowing well in advance if you need to remove that bottleneck for a client, that's where it's at. So.
Okay. And my last question is around how do you make scalability and infrastructure definitely, I think, vital to, making it scalable. But in having the right data or the vast amount of data to build AI capabilities, not just for your use case, but maybe for multiple departments in your team. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's something about AI training that I always tell people, and I think there's a misnomer that the more data, the better. It's weird. That's not actually true. Well, it's true in some capacities, but it's not simply the more data that you're training on. We're actually starting to see this as a limitation with large language models, where more data can actually be a bad thing. It's the quality of the data that you're using. So in a sense, more data is good because you can then use a smaller subset of that data that is much higher quality with your own selecting. That is true across most of the models that we use. But I would also add to that clever training strategies, clever deployment strategies can really make or break the performance of a model, not just the data itself, but just being clever about how you're using that data. And like I said earlier, the sub-selection of the quality based on your entire data set that you have available to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any last minute thoughts on overall buy versus build that we really haven't covered or questions I haven't asked?
Not hugely. It's something where a lot of the times I see buyers struggle, like I said, because they go to a non-healthcare subject matter expert. Um, just I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have a clinical focused AI team versus a non-clinical, and the difference that makes in understanding the problem, because it's a tough domain to work in. So that would be my number one suggestion.
Great. Well, thanks, Will, for the time. That's all we have, and really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Mia.